One of our presenters will be a few minutes late, but we're going to go ahead and get started. So we want to be respectful of your time today. So my name is Charlotte Lamb, and I'm in the City Manager's office, assisting this effort. And just, what's going to happen today. First, we're going to do a quick introduction to the arts and culture work that the city is doing, as well as this grant. And then there'll be open-ended Q&A at the end of the presentation, so please leave your questions to the end. If you do have a question, you can look for the image of the hand to use the raise your hand function on your screen, and we will call on you to ask your question. You can also send a question in the chat. Just make sure you're sending the question to everyone so that all of our panelists can see it today. And if you've joined by phone, we'll ask for questions from call-in users at the end as well. So this meeting is going to be recorded, and the recording will be posted on public input where the application lives, as well as an update of the frequently asked questions section. And that will be live on Monday. So if you have a friend who you know is interested and missed it, you can point them that way on Monday. Thank you guys for joining us. So this is a really quick recap of how all this came to be with the City of Charlotte. So in January of 2021, Mayor Lyles created an ad hoc committee of city council members with the task of developing policy for arts and culture. And in June, they recommended an advisory board, and city council approved that. And so the Arts and Culture Advisory Board was established. In July of 2021, the Infusion Fund came to be, and that was when the city increased its annual investment in arts and culture to $6 million per year. And Foundations of the Carolinas led a fundraising campaign to match funding that the city had committed to for a 3-year period. So we've got how the board came to be and then how the funding came to be right there. So in September of 2021, Priya was hired to be the first arts and culture officer for the city of Charlotte, and she'll be joining us later today. And then in November 21, the advisory board members were brought on board. So there are 18 members of this group. 3 were tapped by the mayor, 6 by city council, and 9 by the private sector. And this board will work with the arts and culture officer and the community to allocate the funding that we've got. So with that, it's determining the allocation for the remaining FY 2022 budget, which we've done and is where this grant came from. It's determining the allocation for fiscal year 2023 and 2024, and as well as developing a comprehensive cultural plan for the city. So here's an overview of how the funding has been allocated for 2022. As you can see, there are $800,000 for general operating or unrestricted grants. And half of that is this grant program right here. And the other half is being administered by the Arts and Science Council to artists and creatives. So when we get to the FAQ today, there's a lot of questions about eligibility, and some of these might be better served through the program that Arts and Science Council will be administering later in the spring. So just keep an eye out for that as well. So deadlines. On Monday, we will have an update FAQ section that will reflect everything that we hear today, and the presentation will be made available. And then on the 23rd at 5 p.m. is where if you ask questions after that, we're not going to be able to respond to them prior to the closing of the application window. At least it won't be reflected in the FAQ section. We'll try to send out emails at the 9th hour. but it won't be reflected on that FAQ section page. And on March 24th, at 11:59 p.m., the applications are due, and this is a program that automatically closes, so we don't have a lot of wiggle room with that. So just really keep that in mind when completing it. And then by April 30th, all the applicants will be notified, whether funded or not. We'll make sure to get back to everyone who did complete a completed application. And to get to that application, it is publicinput.com/arts2022. Eligibility. So right now, nonprofit organizations with 501c3 status, whose primary function is for arts and culture, are eligible. Also, groups or collectives of artists or creatives whose primary function is arts and culture are also eligible. But this group, if they don't have 501c3 status, will need to use a fiscal agent or a fiscal sponsor that does in order to receive funds. And these applicants need to provide a memo from their fiscal agent or sponsor showing proof of this relationship, along with the information from that fiscal sponsor's 501c3 letter. Applicants also must have not received other funding through the infusion fund during the 2022 fiscal year, and that is July 2021 through June 2022 at the time of this award. This includes funding through the Arts and Science Council's fiscal year 2022 cultural vision grants and artist support grants, which were supported through the infusion fund. Fiscal sponsors or agents can have received infusion funds in fiscal year 2022. I guess just a little more insight on fiscal agents is they are really the ones that the city would be writing the check to and would hold the money. But if they're a fiscal agent, then they would be distributing it back to that organization to use. So they aren't getting double funds, but are more holding it and working with you all to manage it properly. So applicants also must be based in Charlotte, North Carolina. So here are some of the frequently asked questions that we've heard regarding eligibility. So regarding for-profit creative businesses, are they eligible? Right now, they are not. So this particular grant is for nonprofits or groups or collectives using that fiscal agent. And, you know, the advisory board is looking at how we might use the infusion fund in fiscal year 2023 and 2024. And that might be a possibility for expanding the buckets of money and how we're using them, but not right now. And as well as individual artists who are not affiliated with a group or collective, they are not currently eligible for that grant, for this grant. But as we said, some of our operating grants are being administered by Arts and Culture Advisory Board, by Arts and Science Council, and they will be distributing project-specific funding in the spring. So please keep an eye out for that, and we will also be sharing that information on our own website, etc. So the primary purpose or function of the organization is not arts and culture, but we do some arts and culture programming. Are we eligible? Unfortunately, no. This grant is for organizations and groups whose primary mission is based in arts and culture. And, you know, if there are specific examples, feel free to get those to us and we can give you a more specific answer, but in general, the answer is no there. And then, can art departments or clubs at public schools apply? Yes, organizations and groups, you know, primary mission, arts and culture, we've really hit that home today, are eligible to apply. But public schools are not considered a nonprofit when it comes to their tax status. So a public school applicant will need to work with a fiscal agent or sponsor. Parent-teacher associations or booster clubs are normally 501c3 certified, So you would want to work with your corresponding agent there to get a memo and get that out. So geography. Will this grant program support organizations serving the greater Charlotte region that are outside of Charlotte city limits? So this particular grant will not. We are funding organizations that are based in Charlotte and serve Charlotte, but they could certainly serve the greater region as well. But this is also something that the board will be talking about when we look at 2023 and 2024 funding. So things could always change in the future, but right now this is how this specific grant is being administered. And administration. So how much funding can we request? And can it cover the whole operating budget for the year? So applicants may request up to $20,000. However, it's recommended not to request more than 1/3 of the annual operating budget. For example, if you had a $5,000 annual budget, you would request up to $1,500. How can my organization use these funds? Are there any restrictions on how the funds are used? So recipients can use the money at their discretion for purposes related to arts and culture. So this could be renting space for rehearsal, art making performance, skills training, professional career development, paying artists and other personnel. But ineligible expenditures include the purchase of alcoholic beverages, personal use items, and any political or public policy campaigns. Non-partisan voter registration is permitted, though, if that was to be included in some way. That's always a little asterisk we have. So if an organization is applying with a fiscal sponsor, will it be a problem if the fiscal sponsor is also applying for funding? Nope, these will be treated as separate applications because, like we said, the fiscal sponsor will not be dipping into your funds. Do we need a 501c3 IRS letter if our fiscal agent is Mecklenburg County facility like Parks and Rec? So this is very similar to the public school question that we got earlier, and that governments are not nonprofits in their tax status. It's just a little different. So they would need to work with a fiscal agent, and it could be Partners for Parks that we have in Charlotte, or a similar Friends of group that might be around. Partners for Parks is just the one that I'm most familiar with, but I'm sure there are other opportunities there. And with that specific example too, Parks and Recreation is such a big organization. I would think that maybe you have a division or similar that is focused on arts and culture, and it could be the application can be focused on that as opposed to the much larger organization. So technology, we had a few technical issues here, but the application link doesn't work. When will it be open so I can apply? So the application is open, but you'll need to scroll to the bottom of the application information and FAQ page and select continue to move on to that application. How do I send a copy of the 501c3 letter from the IRS? So at the bottom left of the question, this is that gets at your nonprofit status. You can select the plus add files button, and you can add multiple files that way. But thank you for asking this question. We added some clarifying language in the question to help make sure that's highlighted to everyone else who comes across it. Also, is there a way to save the application and come back? No, there's not a way to save your progress, but all incomplete applications will just be removed. So once you have the information needed, just start fresh on a new application. The half filled out ones won't be counted against you or anything. They'll just be cleared from our portal system. So feel free to just start fresh with a new application. So we've gotten some questions in the chat box, and also Priya has joined us. So Priya, can you see the chat box? Could you introduce yourself and then attempt to get at some of these?
Sure. Thanks, Charlotte. And hi, everyone. I'm sorry I wasn't on right at the beginning. I had to enlist the help of our IT guru to help us help me get online. So glad to be with you and welcome to this webinar. So for those of you I haven't met before, I'm Priya Sircar, and I'm the Arts and Culture Officer with the City of Charlotte. And I work with our team here and with the Arts and Culture Advisory Board to oversee the Infusion Fund allocations of funding, as well as the community-wide cultural planning process that will soon be beginning. I never miss a moment to plug that. So hopefully you'll all be involved in that engagement process once we begin later in spring. Thank you for your interest in this program. I'm sure Charlotte has already covered the basics, or let me know if not, Charlotte, but I'm glad you guys got started without waiting for me any longer. I will go ahead and kind of dive into a few of these questions, or I guess all the questions, but we've gotten maybe 3 or 4, I think, here. So yeah, I'll do my best to answer these. And I think on some of them, I think we will need to just get some confirmation. And so we'll do our best to do that and get back to you and put that on the FAQ once we update that following this webinar. One of the questions comes from Scott. And it says, does a fiscal sponsor or of a group or collective have to be a primary purpose of arts and culture? No, I would say no, because really their function is that they're a 501c3 and they are, as Charlotte described, essentially, holding that and distributing those funds to you for your use. And so, yeah, as long as you have a primary purpose of arts and culture, that should be fine. The next question comes from Chris. Can our fiscal sponsor be from outside Charlotte? Our collective is Charlotte-based, but we use a fiscal sponsor who's based in Chicago. This is one of those I would want to just get double, I would want to get confirmation of, unless Charlotte and Julia, if you know the answer to this, because my answer would be, I think that's fine. But I would want to make sure with the Foundation for the Carolinas, because actually in this case with the Infusion Fund, the Foundation for the Carolinas cuts the checks. And so I would love to confirm with them that there's no issue with the fiscal sponsor being elsewhere. But Julia or Charlotte, do you happen to know for sure that, the answer to that for the foundation's perspective?
My gut reaction is that I don't believe it would be a problem, but you're right that is something that we have to double check since we don't live in procurement world.
I see you nodding, Julia. So, okay, yeah. So thanks for that question, Chris. Again, we don't think that would be an issue, but we'll double check with the foundation and we will post the answer in our FAQ when we update it with these questions. Next question comes from Hector. How will equity in funding play a role in funding decisions? Some demographic groups are funded more often than others. That's a great question. And I think that is a question that is kind of broader, applicable to both this funding opportunity as well as the work of the Infusion Fund in general. The Infusion Fund, the Arts and Culture Advisory Board has adopted guiding principles, which recently I've had some conversations with folks that have indicated to me that it's going to be helpful for us to post those guiding principles. We've been talking about them in each of our recent meetings, and we'll be putting those and we talk about them in the meetings So some of you who've been tuning in might have seen them, but we can add them. We will add them to our website, so those are clear. And equity is one of the guiding principles. So, some of the things that this advisory board and we as a team have been talking about are what are the things that have been barriers to access for funding. One of the things that we are trying to do to lower those barriers or eliminate barriers. An example of it is actually this funding opportunity. Whereas previously, some groups have received unrestricted funding and general operating funding. This opportunity right now with this open call is a chance to open up the access to that type of funding beyond groups that have received it, in the past year over year. So we're trying to make this unrestricted operating funding available to more folks. So that's one way. Another way is that we're trying to be mindful of how folks might apply. So one way is that, for example, accepting applications in various languages is something that we're doing with this open call. Currently, the application itself is available online in our, the two most spoken languages in Charlotte, English and Spanish. But as we've also said, that is, if anyone is interested in applying for this grant in another language that is their first language, that we will work with them to have that application as part of this process. So that's another way that we're working to achieve equity in funding. And this is going to be an ongoing conversation among the Arts and Culture Advisory Board and our team as we look at future funding. Let's see. Go to the next question, which comes from Tracy. It says, you can only apply for a third of your annual budget. What if this is a new collective art project that doesn't have an established annual budget? That's a great question. So again, I would say that this is there's a couple kinds of funding, I guess, that the infusion fund so far is supporting. There's project funding, which the advisory board is looking at how to offer that. One way is something that is an opportunity fund, which you probably saw on an earlier slide that Charlotte shared, which is one of the, we're calling them buckets, which is meant to support projects, programs, and initiatives. And that really is just very fledgling, and we're working on developing guidelines and process for that we'll be sharing once we have worked through that with the advisory board. And so that's project funding. And then in this, as Charlotte shared, this grant opportunity is in sort of another category, which is general operating funds. So these are not project, not really meant for, say, a project, but meant for kind of ongoing funding needs or expenses that you might have in the ongoing work of your organization or group. And so I guess if there's not an annual budget for this, for your group's work, if the work is really structured more around a project, then it may be that this particular grant isn't the right grant for you. It might be that a project specific grant is actually the right grant. So that's something where it might make sense to reach out to Charlotte, with some more, to kind of delve into the specifics of what your group situation is and if it's a particular project. And then maybe Charlotte and we can, put our heads together as well to assess whether, this funding mechanism is a fit, or if a different opportunity would actually be a better fit if it's a project and not a group that has ongoing kind of activities and operations. Let's see. The next question comes from Tori. It says, can a group of artists with LLC status apply with a nonprofit fiscal sponsor? So my gut reaction, I definitely want to hear from Charlotte and Julia as well if you have a different perspective. But as I interpret this, an LLC status is essentially a for-profit status. It's a limited liability corporation. And so that would be, I would consider that to be for-profit, a for-profit company, and therefore not eligible for this particular grant. But Charlotte and Julia, do you have a different perspective on that question? No, I'm saying no from Julia. Okay, thanks. Let's see. Looking for, okay, so I'm gonna, I see a ditto to Tracy's question from Megan. I want to ask it because I actually am interpreting it in a slightly different way. So Megan asks, ditto to Tracy's question, we are a new 501c3 and don't have an annual budget yet. So I would ask whether this might be an opportunity for you to develop your annual budget, as a new organization. It sounds like you're not necessarily, because I know some groups get together specifically around a certain project, right? They don't necessarily have a 501c3 status or haven't kind of solidified as a group that does ongoing activities together beyond the scope of one project or program. And so if you're a new 501c3, it sounds to me like you might be planning to have ongoing activities, throughout the year beyond one project. And if that's the case, then you might be, having your first annual budget that you'd be developing. So that, again, I would encourage you to, reach out to us and reach out to Charlotte so that we can hopefully address your particular situation. But I would think this actually, if you're a group that you definitely know you're going to be having operations throughout this upcoming year, if you're, just because you're a new group and you haven't yet fleshed that out, this could be an opportunity where you would be able to flesh that out and get a feel for what you think it's going to take for you to operate over the course of this year coming activities. And again, with this one, is if you've had a chance to check out the application, you can see that it is a pretty streamlined application that doesn't have, we're not requesting a budget. We are asking what are the things that you plan to use the funds for, and there will be a simple and straightforward report eventually. But again, this is, I think, could be a great opportunity for some unrestricted funds for organizations, regardless of how long you've been around. We just wouldn't be funding the entirety of the operation, as Charlotte explained. Let's see. Next question. Does a podcast consider as art and culture program? It is, yes, it is an arts and culture program. I'm not sure, this question is from Kai Wen. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. A podcast is an arts and culture program. I guess I'm not sure, and this is where reaching out to us directly might be helpful, so we can look at your particular situation. That sounds to me more like, I don't know if it would be, as you said, a program or project, so that may not be a fit for this. But if there's an organization or a group that is doing, ongoing activities, then this grant might be a fit.
So let me, if I can.
Sure, go ahead, go for it.
So we are a STEM organization supporting students. Then we are initiate a portion of the organization to dedicate to create a podcast for the student to learn how to produce and broadcast reporting, but they are reporting the subject of science. So is the main function of the organization. So we are still talking about whether we want to spin off, make it become 2 501c3, or we remain one and one supporting this new program. And we just have a lot of students interested in the marketing and the arts and broadcasting type of activity that we are doing to support the STEM program today. So we just want to initiate to create this new podcast is solely dedicated to producing and solely dedicated for the student who want to eventually go into the broadcasting and reporting domain. But the subject is science and STEM. Science is the science, technology, engineering, and math, the STEM program, STEM careers. But the program itself, what I practice, what I do is broadcasting.
Okay, thank you for explaining that. Yeah. To me, that sounds like that's a project that is a new project or program, and it's not then the organization's main function isn't arts and culture, but it is an arts and culture program. And so if the funding is for the program, then I don't think that that would be a fit for this particular grant, but that a project specific grant would be more appropriate. But if it's helpful to connect and talk it through further, then I think it would be great if you would reach out to us and we can, have a follow-up conversation.
Sure.
Oh, apologies. I was just gonna say that we have gotten some technical questions in the chat. So before we hit some more of these eligibility questions, could I share my screen and just address some of those?
Sure, thanks, Charlotte. That sounds great.
Of course. Hi, everyone. So if you go to publicinput.com /arts 2022, this is the page that you'll see. And if you scroll down to the bottom, here's the overview, information about the session you're on right now, an area to collect questions, and then this frequently asked questions section, which will be updated based on what we've gotten today from you all. So if you select continue, it will actually bring you to the application portion. So everything with a star is a required question. You can type in your name of organization, group, collective, comment it out. And then this is the question where you can add files. So if I hit the add file button and click the drag and drop area, I can add a PDF. I can add PowerPoint. Let me grab a Word one too. I can add a FAQ, my FAQ Word document in preparation for this meeting. So it'll take a few different types and a few different files. So then you just, click and, oh, maybe I have to hit comment to make sure they got in. Awesome. And then at the bottom, we hit submit survey. And I'm going to stop sharing just to make sure that I didn't lead you guys astray, and that all of those files were available on the other end. But I just don't want to show you everyone's applications so far. So give me 1 second. This platform does work best on Google Chrome. And I did see someone say that this should be available in different languages. And we do have a Spanish version of this form, and we'll drop that in the chat for you all.
And I would just add that if there's, so we went with, we provided in the languages that are the most spoken, but also recognize that there are other languages that are folks' preferred languages. And so what we talked about is that, as I mentioned earlier, if you know of a group or you're with a group that would be interested in applying, but their preference would be to apply in a language other than English or Spanish, please reach out to us, reach out to Charlotte, or ask them to reach out, and then we will work with them to be able to receive their application in their language of choice, and then we can work on our end to have it translated and be able to have it in the mix.
And we did get all those attachments that I added, so it doesn't do a great job of saying, you know, congrats, we received your attachments when you submit them, but everything that you upload there does get included. So now we can get back to the other questions.
Thanks, Charlotte. So I'm going to keep going because we've got more questions that have been submitted in the chat. So this is from Anshu. What is considered arts and culture and what is not, particularly for underserved Alana organizations? That is a great question and very broad. So I think that, you know, for arts and culture, we generally would take kind of a broader view of what is considered arts and culture without knowing kind of if there's something in particular that you have in mind. It would be, I would again encourage you to reach out to Charlotte, and you know, we can answer the question for, you know, your specific situation. Oh, I don't know if my Wi-Fi is breaking up and if you guys heard the end of that, but I think that that's one where we can, you know, address on a case-by-case basis. But I would say, generally speaking, I think that this Arts and Culture Advisory Board is taking, you know, kind of a broader view of, you know, what's arts and culture, and we can address it on a, you know, case-by-case basis if there's a question. Let's see. Please explain more about demographics requirements. We don't have requirements, but what we're trying to understand with asking you to describe whom you're serving is just get more of an understanding of, you know, who are your, you know, audiences and participants, and how would you describe whom you're trying to serve. So we don't have a particular demographic requirement. And I think for us, it's getting a better understanding of your work and who you're working with and serving. And it is going to be helpful information for this Arts and Culture Advisory Board, going back to the question on equity, as we were, talked about a little bit earlier. One of the questions was about that. And so part of the process of, you know, thinking about equity and how we can address that is to get a better understanding of who all you are serving in your arts and culture work. We have a question from Nyla that it says, I'm on the Infusion Fund main page, but do not see the continue button at the bottom of the page to go to the application. Oh, sorry. Is this the question that you answered earlier, Charlotte? Or
Yeah, I hope so.
Okay. Okay. Great. Thank you for addressing that. Let's see. Does an outreach program to a disability group that includes creative arts as well as education and employment opportunities meet the requirements? So I think there for me, the key is that it's a program. So, and this isn't a program specific grant. So this is an unrestricted general operating funds for an organization. And so because it's unrestricted and it's general operating, that's why it needs to be going to an organization or group that, that where the primary function is arts and culture. So, if the funding is sought for a specific program where the rest of the activities of the organization or group are not arts and culture, then I think this particular grant wouldn't be the right fit, and it would, a project or program specific grant sounds like it would be a better fit for that. But again, that's one where it would probably be helpful to have a conversation. So if you want to reach out to us and reach out to Charlotte, that might be good. Let's see. If you have received this question is from Nina. I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, so sorry if I'm not. If you've received a grant from the Arts and Science Council, but it was through a different fiscal sponsor, is that okay? I'm not sure if that grant was supported through the infusion fund. So I think this is one where it would be helpful to reach out to us and if you have the specific information, because I think we would need to know what was the grant that you received. If it's a cultural vision grant or an artist support grant that was within this fiscal year, the 2021-2022 fiscal year, then it likely was supported through the infusion fund. But again, if you're able to reach out to us with the specifics of that grant and the timing of the grant, we actually also have a list of the recipients of grants that were supported through the infusion fund that were done through the Arts and Science Council. Then we would be able to answer your question, with confidence. Okay, this is a question from Indira. Does internal restaffing and capacity building and external inclusion programs with a focus on access to arts and diversity in the arts both qualify? Yes, I think meaning I'm guessing if you're asking about the types of uses of the funding, those are fine. I think that using the funds for those types of things are eligible for these unrestricted funds. So in terms of eligibility for the grant itself, it really just comes down to what's the primary function or purpose of the organization or group. But these types of expenditures are perfectly fine with the type of grant. So this comes from Amber. We conduct our work in Charlotte and serve the Charlotte community, but our address is listed in Huntersville. Are we eligible to apply? Unfortunately for this grant, it would be no, because this particular grant is within the Charlotte, the city of Charlotte, organizations and groups based in the city of Charlotte. So I know there are organizations that are located in various places that serve the Charlotte community as well as other communities. And as Charlotte Lamb said, the Arts and Culture Advisory Board is looking at that kind of question on a broader scale, for FY23 funding. But for this particular grant, it's restricted to the city of Charlotte. Another question is from Caroline. My question is about eligibility. We are a 501c3 nonprofit based in Charlotte. However, the writing community we serve is from all parts of Mecklenburg. I think that's actually fine because you're based in Charlotte and serving, I would assume, Charlotte folks, and the writing community is also elsewhere from outside of Charlotte, but you're based here and you're a 501c3, and the primary purpose sounds like it's arts and culture. And so that sounds like to me you would be eligible for this opportunity. But again, if there are some more specifics around that it would be helpful to talk through, then please do reach out to us. Another question is from Scott. It says, if the nonprofit uses its discipline above and beyond, in addition to entertainment, creativity, and imagination, example, trauma healing, social emotional education, and real world skill building might be eligible for this funding. You know what? I'm not sure. I think that one is probably going to require kind of more of a conversation, Scott, in order to just better understand the work and kind of the mission of the organization or group. So I would encourage you to reach out to Charlotte, and that way we have a better understanding of what is the primary mission and focus. But it sounds like it could be eligible, but just would be easier to figure out in a conversation. Okay, there's another question from Anshu. There are 38 groups who get annual funding because they've been funded before. What makes them eligible for annual funding other than previous support? If we get funding with this grant, does that allow us to be considered for annual funding? So that's a good question. Their funding, the funding of those groups through the infusion fund for general operating support, nothing else made them eligible beyond the fact that they had received previous support, because part of the purpose of the infusion fund was to try to continue to have support that would help to stabilize the sector, which included those groups. And when the infusion fund was set up, the funding partners didn't want, they knew that they would take time to get a board in place and to get an arts and culture officer hired. And so they did not want for those groups that were, would typically have gotten funding at the beginning of the fiscal year to not be able to operate because they would have no funding. So this particular this grant opportunity right now, the point of it is to make exactly the same kind of funding. So again, those organizations have gotten unrestricted operating grants. Previously, it was from ASC, and this year it's through the infusion fund. And this grant opportunity right now is meant to also make that kind of funding available to other groups who typically have not gotten it through ASC and also did not get it through the infusion fund at first. And so it's actually the same type of funding, and this is being done through an open call. And I think there was a second part of your question, which had to do with, if we get funding with this grant, does this allow us to be considered for annual funding? So I guess one thing I would say is annual funding, I think whether it's annual is an open question that is up to the advisory board as they look ahead to FY23 funding. But I think that the reason they were funded annually, or to me, the term annually funded simply refers to that most of those groups, but not all of them, received operating grants, annually, and did so, each year. But they, again, for the time period of the infusion fund, the advisory board is considering how they want to allocate grants for fiscal year 23, and then they'll look ahead at fiscal year 24. So we don't know right now what their decision's going to be about providing. I think I froze. I was just saying that we don't know yet what the advisory board is going to want to do with their fiscal year 23 funding with regard to unrestricted operating grants. But we just did know that, this, for the funds that we still had remaining in FY22, we wanted to make sure that this type of funding was open to more organizations and groups beyond the 38 who had previously received it. So we don't know what the funding relationship will be with, if you're funded through this round, how will that relate to the FY23 funding? We're not sure yet, because the board is just now starting to look at what they might do for FY23. See, I think we have More questions. I've already submitted our application but did not log in. How can I edit the application based off of today's conversation clarifications? Charlotte, could you answer that question, please?
Yeah,
Thanks.
I would submit a new application, and if we get two from the same organization, we'll take the one that is the most complete or the one that was submitted closest to the deadline.
Thanks, Charlotte. Can you give examples of the types of things that can be funded? So I think, Charlotte, you talked a bit about this, but if you wouldn't mind maybe talking, you know, kind of just revisiting that question and giving some examples.
Certainly, yeah, anything that your business would generally need to function. So is that renting space? Is that materials for a project? Or is it getting your accountant on board or whatever's needed to get that 501c3 so that, you know, next time when these opportunities come, you don't need a fiscal sponsor. So it's professional development, things that you need to operate, pretty open-ended, but it is not buying alcoholic beverages. And I know that might seem way over here, but we've seen, you know, gallery openings and such where they've got complimentary wine, and you know, that's an example of something that this can't fund, as well as any personal use things. So that's, you know, going on vacation, I guess, or you know, your non-art related car needs a new tire. But maybe if it's your truck that you move all your supplies around, we could figure it out. But the other thing is anything, oh, you can't donate to a political campaign, but you can do voter registration, should that be close to your mission.
Thanks, Charlotte.
Specific to a culture.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm just going to read this question. So someone said, what about food specific to a culture? So if you are purchasing food for an event that revolves around arts and culture, that is good to go. If you're producing food and that is your tie to culture, I'll let Priya answer that one.
Yeah, if it's about, I'm not sure, I guess I'm not sure if the question is about purchasing food, like as a use of funds, or if it's about like mission and purpose of the organization. So I'm not sure if I don't see that question, or, well, I'll just answer from both perspectives. So if it's about purchasing food, like that's fine. If it's, I think I'm having a lot of Wi-Fi issues. Can you guys hear me okay? Charlotte, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we
I
can
keep
hear you.
freezing. Okay, great.
So another question we got is, my group will be applying for funds to go towards rental facilities for an annual creative arts conference, which happens in Charlotte. Would this qualify? Oh yeah, that's awesome. Keep us updated. Definitely up our alley as well.
Yeah, that definitely falls within the type of expenses that are fine for unrestricted funds. Quick question, Charlotte. So John is asking, saying, I did not see the add file option in the application, but already submitted. Can he go into his submitted application, or should he just apply, just resubmit and attach the file this time?
You know, I also don't want to make you guys so frustrated that this becomes a much more of a taxing task than it needs to be. If you've submitted a complete application without your attachments, you can just email me the attachments. Just be very clear in your email the organization that these correspond with. And my email is in the chat as well.
Thanks, Charlotte. Can an org that has previously received an infusion fund grant serve as a fiscal sponsor? Yes, I think Charlotte, you may have touched on that, but yes, that's fine. And does the fiscal sponsor have to be based in Charlotte? I think we mentioned we'll be getting back to you guys on the FAQ with that one. We think that should be okay, but we'll confirm with the foundation. There's a question from Douglas. Do all projects need to begin after April 30th, or can the funding be used to assist with a project that began prior to April 30th? Also, is there a deadline the project needs to be completed on? Thanks in advance. So again, this isn't for projects. So if you want to use the funding for something that's is in progress, that's totally fine. The period of the grant is 1 year. So basically you would have a year from the date of the award letter. And also I'll just note again, when these are distributed, it will be by the Foundation for the Carolinas. And so you'd get an award letter from them, and it'll say the amount and the date. And so you have a year from then to use the funds toward, you know, the whatever you want to use it for based on, you know, the guidelines that Charlotte just shared. So yeah, again, the grant is not for a particular project, but you can use it for things that are in process. Let's see. I think we've answered the next few. We've got some kind of repeats.
Yeah, thank you guys. And there's the question box on the application, also email, and reach out. Priya, any closing words?
No, just again, thank you so much for joining this webinar, for your interest in this opportunity. We're excited about it again, because as I said, we're trying to provide more of this unrestricted operating type of funding that can be so difficult to come by to more organizations and groups that have not necessarily had access to those funds previously in previous years. So thanks for reaching out. And yeah, please email. You can see Charlotte's email address there, and let us know if you have other more specific questions that might be best, you know, discussed in a conversation, and we'll definitely do our best to get back to you as quickly as possible. Thanks everyone, and have a wonderful weekend.